everybody, meteorologist Brad Warner here with Region Weather Live. And if you follow my Facebook page earlier today, I mentioned how the models seem to be trending a certain way when it comes to this big storm that's coming this weekend. And ultimately, there are two factors, there's two things that are going on in the atmosphere that is ultimately driving how the models are trending in these directions. Now, the first thing that the models seem to be picking up on more and more, or trending in a way, is the moisture that's going to be feeding into this storm. Because as we kind of go through the day on Friday, everything's kind of locked and loaded. We've got all this moisture getting drawn up, and ultimately everything kind of gets pulled into this region here, kind of priming the pump for some severe weather from, southern parts of Minnesota all the way down to Arkansas. But ultimately, when these storms kind of get going and get firing, it sort of robs some of the moisture further to the north. And so it robs all the energy that's going to be feeding into our portion of the storm. Now, the second thing I mentioned is sort of the lack of cold air. There is hardly any snow cover out there, a little bit across the far, far northern reaches of our area. And even that snow that fell across southern parts of Minnesota is pretty much gone after they had some 60-degree days down there. And so we're already starting off with hardly any snow cover up here. The ground is warming up just a little bit. Really, most of the colder air is still, well off to the north and west. So what moisture is feeding in early, this is around Friday about 4 p.m. Central Time. So what moisture is there at this point? Most of it's actually going to be rain the way it's starting to look like. And then as we get a little bit later, around 6 to 7 p.m., we've got more showers, perhaps even some thunderstorms firing up here and there across the eastern parts of the Dakotas, parts of Minnesota. Again, as I mentioned before, there is that possibility perhaps of southern portions of Minnesota could see a few severe storms with some hail, perhaps some gusty winds, an outside isolated chance of a brief tornadic spin up, but I think ultimately that's looking like that should stay mainly south of our area. But nevertheless, we have these storms that develop a little bit further to the south. And it looks like, as I said, the north just really doesn't get going, and it's still kind of warmish at this point. And then as we get a little bit closer, as we get to about 9 to 10 p.m., some of that moisture now begins to kind of start to make it into the area. But ultimately still, we've got those storms rolling through Illinois and eventually heading towards Indiana and Michigan. By this point, perhaps we get a little bit cold air being pulled in to where we might be seeing some freezing rain across eastern parts of North Dakota. And here we are around midnight or so. But man, it really doesn't seem to be until after about 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, once this moisture really gets drawn and pulled up and into the system, until some of that really gets going across Minnesota. So by this point in the scenario, by the time the good moisture finally gets pulled in, well, by now the low pressure is already into Minnesota, and it kind of has cut off a lot of the areas further off to the west from really getting any kind of worrisome type of snow out there. And so by this point, by 6 to 7 o'clock Saturday morning, now we've got the moisture kind of there. We've got the cold air that's kind of filtered in by this point. So only it seems like once we get into early morning hours of Saturday is really when, I guess, the nastiness starts to kick in between the snow and the freezing rain. And so the trends have been that, like I said, mainly, out in the west, I'm really getting less and less concerned about you guys out in the central and western parts of the Dakotas. It's more so from, perhaps the James River Valley on eastward is kind of the area that we're going to continue to focus on. And gosh, it's even looking like maybe even further east than that. I mean, ultimately, it might wind up just being mostly across Minnesota that gets the wintry type of weather with this. And the second part of this, to go along with the lack of real cold air behind this, I mean, we've got all this warm air that's getting drawn up ahead of along the east side of this storm system. And on the backside, like I said, not quite as cold. And that actually allows some of these storm systems to ride just a little bit further north and east instead of coming out of the Rockies and ejecting more northward. If there was more cold air on the back end of this than there is warm air, a lot of times that's what you see. When we get a good push of cold air coming out of the north, these Colorado lows seem to dig out more and take more of a harsher northern turn, and that would in turn affect more of the western parts of the Dakotas when that happens. But that's not there. We seem to have more warm air than cold air, so therefore this storm system kind of tracks a little more eastward. And there you go. You've got two different things, two different drivers that these models are picking up on. And that's why it seems like the trend more so is that the eastern, far, far eastern Dakotas into Minnesota is ultimately going to be the area of concern. And of course, this could still change. Things are still going to adjust. There might be a limited amount of moisture by the time it's all said and done. And unfortunately, gosh, when these models pick up on these storm systems so far out, it seems to happen a lot that by the time we actually get to the day, the moisture becomes limited, and it's sort of trending that way. But I think ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to wind up with more of a narrow band, a narrow area that's really going to get hit. Some areas are going to get hit hard. They're still going to see the winds. They're still going to see the freezing rain, some accumulating snow. And then there's going to be other areas, probably not too far to the west, that are going to be going like, what big storm? It didn't come. Well, it did, but it really narrowed itself down into a small corridor. But unfortunately, I'm becoming a little less confident on where exactly, if we have a blizzard potential, where exactly this could take place. As you probably have noticed, when I first started off, I had a big red area basically in through here. And then I made it smaller and pushed it a little bit further east. And now I kind of replaced it with more of just the yellow area and pushed this yellow area even a little bit further east as well. Part of the problem might become is that the heavier snowfall will be further to the north, more so in these wooded areas. And so the areas up in the north here might not quite see the winds, partly because of the wooded areas might reduce down the amount of blowing snow. So while the north probably has the best potential for seeing the snowfall, it has a little less potential for the stronger winds. So that's kind of why that area is in yellow. And ultimately, if I had to pick a spot right now, I guess I'd probably say west central to southwestern parts of Minnesota, just because as things have been trending, the way the snow or the heavier snow seems to be potentially setting up right now, these areas could see the winds along with it. And so that might be the area of focus regarding the reduced visibilities below a quarter mile to possibly zero at times, maybe seeing some blizzard type conditions. Again, this could all change. This obviously has changed as we've gotten closer to this time frame. So this is still flexible, but that's, if I got to pick a spot right now, this would be it. And then unfortunately, still not real clear as to how much freezing rain and sleet will take place and where exactly. So this area is still very big. I understand that, but there's so many areas that could start off with rain and then transitioning into freezing rain with a little bit of snow afterwards. But gosh, that freezing rain, even if you get a little bit of freezing drizzle on those roadways, cause a big impact on the travel conditions, and it just makes me very, very nervous. So right now I still got a big area of this purplish, pinkish, hueish area in through here that we still got to watch. We still got to think about with this winter storm system. Hopefully I can narrow it down a little more in the next day or so. And to just give you an early sense of some of the timing, again, this could all very well change, so don't take this to heart by any means. You've seen how the forecast has already kind of fluctuated, but if you want to see a timing on how things could develop at this point, this is 9 p.m. on a Friday evening. This is around midnight to 1 a.m. Saturday morning. You can see that freezing rain begins to develop across the Red River Valley. 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, snow begins to develop across eastern parts of South Dakota. Again, that freezing rain in northwest parts of Minnesota. Continues to be rain across the east. And then by about 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning, still rain in the east. That freezing rain and sleet line pushes a little bit further east. The snow line as well. A narrow band potentially of snow. And then by 9 to 10 a.m., that freezing rain and snow begins to pick up across central and northwestern parts of Minnesota. By around the noon time, it looks like that cold air wants to take hold of just a little more. So you've got a narrower band of freezing rain and sleet to where it becomes more rain and then quickly becomes over to snow. 3 to 4 in the afternoon on Saturday. And then by about 6 to 7 p.m., most of the snow and the freezing rain has left the building, along with the winds with it. So by the time we get into Saturday evening, things should calm down. And then it's just a matter of how long will it take for the roads to recover. And so don't take that as gospel. Obviously, like I've said, that could change, but sort of use it just to help you with any contingency plans, especially if you're traveling across the eastern Dakotas and through Minnesota beginning Friday night, lasting through Saturday. And just keep that in mind that Sunday, it may take a little time for those roads to open up and recuperate. So you might have some hazardous travel conditions lingering a little bit into Sunday as well. So we'll keep you informed. We'll let you know. Make sure, if you haven't done so, check on the Facebook channel. That's kind of where I gave the early heads up this morning, just as I was seeing things come in. We'd kind of post stuff on there, as well as on X. I posted a couple things. So those are two spots to keep an eye on with the latest weather that I am seeing. I'll make sure and post another update going tomorrow night. Hopefully Wednesday. I'm not sure. There's some things going on that I might not be readily available, but I'll try to get you one, or I will get you one for sure Tuesday night to let you know how this storm is taking shape. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Like I always ask, please do that. Hit the bell button that pops up beside it. That way you're alerted when I've uploaded a video just like this, and we'll keep you informed through it all. And if you haven't done so in a while, I haven't asked this for quite some time, but if you haven't done so before in the past, let me know where you're from. Add that in the comments. Always kind of interesting to see where everybody is watching from. All right, everybody, for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner. Everybody have a good day.